What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now, Back to the Past. I'm Alex. In this video, I want to talk about Kingdom Hearts Birth by Sleep. This is the start of hopefully something pretty darn special. I want to go back and I want to start going through these games one at a time. There's a lot to get to, and I'm starting now because although Kingdom Hearts 4 is probably 2 or so years out, it's going to take that long for me to do the proper, I think, justice that this series deserves. So I'm a diehard fan. I've played this game multiple times. I will say it feels a little bit different to go back in, and we're in 2025. I haven't played this game since I think October of 2018. I looked at my save files. Right before Kingdom Hearts 3 is when I replayed pretty much the entire series. I would watch 3, 5, 8 over 2 and the ones that you couldn't really play. But I played through as many as I could. But that was, at this point, many, many years ago. So what's it like now, right now in 2025? How do I feel about it? Well, look, again, I'm always going to be a diehard. I'm always going to love it. But I will say there's parts of this game that have not aged as well as I remember them aging. I still like the basic idea of splitting this thing up into 3 different characters, obviously, and going through relatively the same story, but then kind of seeing every angle to it. I think when it's done well, I think it's done excellently. I think they do a really, really good job of even completing the Disney worlds. And then when you talk about like the main, the Kingdom Hearts story, right, to this game, I think them overlapping and having you experience it as all 3 of them is really, really cool. On top of that, I've always been a pretty big fan of these characters, right? Aqua, Terra, and Ventus, or Ven, if you want. I call him Ventus quite often, so we'll just see how the video goes. But I love these 3 characters, and obviously, they very much symbolize and reflect Sora, Riku, Kairi, and you kind of get that actually as this game goes. It's different playing it for like the 5th or so time, but it's also different just to go back to it versus playing it when it first came out. I gotta be real, I don't remember when I first played this. I actually bought this game physically on the PSP. I have the case. I'll probably do like a shorts video on the channel when we go through the actual box, but I played it through the 1.5, 2.5 thing, which is probably the best version of playing it. But I gotta be honest, I don't even remember. I had to have played it. Well, I definitely played it before 3, and I probably played it years before. Whenever these collections were birthed into the world, I probably played it then, and I did. I fell right in love with these characters. I think the combat is overall pretty good. It's something that I want to analyze a little bit in this video because I think there's really cool moments. I also think there's the gameplay's not as good as I remember it being in some other ways, but overall it was a joy to be back. It reminded me how much I miss Kingdom Hearts. It reminded me how special these games could be, and they keep things actually, I would say, pretty simple in this game, even though Xehanort and Vanitas and they have a larger kind of play and plan going on. In fact, Xehanort even kind of tells Terra that at the very end in the secret ending, that this is just one of the roads he could go down if he chooses to. He doesn't really need Terra. He doesn't need any of that kind of stuff, but he could do it if he wants to. And I guess the reason I'm bringing that up, Kingdom Hearts often looked at, and I think rightly so, confusing franchise. It has a story that gets very convoluted. I love that about it personally, but I know not everybody does. This game, I think, can be very self-contained. It's definitely part of a larger picture, and it's a prequel in a lot of ways to almost every game except for back cover, and then obviously mobile games and other stuff that comes. But I think it does a really good job of fitting in that puzzle piece, right, of being connected to the larger Kingdom Hearts lore, but also being its own standalone story. I think it does a very good job at both of those things. Okay, so let's break this game down a little. One thing it obviously has, I think, to me immediately, is visuals, nails, music. It's got the classics. It's got the classic, whether it's like the orchestral kind of stuff, whether it's the singing and the opening kind of cutscene, which, by the way, is just copywritten all over YouTube, so you can't actually show it. That's okay. But no, the game obviously nails a lot of the aesthetic, a lot of the feel. Feels like Kingdom Hearts, looks like Kingdom Hearts, sounds like Kingdom Hearts. It nails all of those things. And this is a prequel to obviously Kingdom Hearts 1. You see Sora, Riku, and Kairi. By the way, because we're going to go so deep and I'm going to try to analyze as much as I can, we are just going to do full-on spoilers. The game's 15 years old, actually why I wanted to start here and why I think this is actually a good time to start. So I'm not going to be afraid to kind of say anything if you guys haven't played it. I do recommend it. It's one of, still, I think, the better Kingdom Hearts games. It's not as high as I remember it being, but it's still, I would say, a really, really good one. So, again, prequel to it. You got these 3 characters, and what I really like, as I said in the beginning, is, the game splits itself up. So you have the tutorial section, and then you have, okay, you have the 3 characters, and you go through all 3 of them, and you really need all 3 of them in order to complete each other. You could go deeper into that, and actually as you play, you realize, oh, some of the Xehanort reports are only accessible and only unlock once you beat certain things with certain characters. So in order to get literally everything, right, reports and stickers and all that stuff, you need to play as all 3 of these characters. And I do think story-wise, even it's essential. You have the worlds of Peter Pan and the Colosseum and all this kind of stuff, and they're all pretty decent, but you need all 3 of them in order to kind of fill in the gap. So I think canonically, or what you're supposed to do, is go Terra, Ven, Aqua, which is what I do pretty much every time. When you go, I think they do that because they do, maybe not with the main story. The main story, I think at times actually kind of forgets where it's at, which I'll get into in a second. But specifically the Disney worlds, Aqua commonly is kind of the conclusion, and they do follow that. Terra kind of causes things to happen. He's literally out there stealing hearts. The first thing right away, Maleficent convinces him to embrace the darkness and steal a heart. So he kind of causes / he's introduced to this stuff. And then you go through the arcs, and Ven's always kind of the middle arc. He does some things that are important, some things that are not. And then Aqua, I think in all of them, closes them all out. So I like that about it. I think, again, in terms of the positive, when it's done well, and I think the Disney worlds are a good example of when it's done well. You need all 3 of them to complete the stories. Now, to me, and a thing that I don't think, and probably not with any of these games, any Kingdom Hearts game, one thing that's probably not held up so much in my mind that I have once thought is how good those side stories are. I'm a huge lore guy, just in general, in pretty much any game. You can go Alan Wake, Final Fantasy, Kingdom Hearts. I really like the deeper lore. Kingdom Hearts, obviously, is a special game for a lot of reasons. One of it is that, melding of, the Disney worlds and then, Nomura's own just inner creations. And, I think it can be done well when you kind of sandwich both of those in. Sometimes one takes priority. And for me, I love the story of these 3 characters. I love the story of, if you think about it, it's a very Star Wars, and Star Wars is a common, light versus dark in all of Kingdom Hearts. But this game is very, very Episode 3. You got Terra battling with the darkness and Xehanort trying to get it out of him. Xehanort to Palpatine in Star Wars Episode 3 is almost 1-to-1. Terra to Anakin is almost 1-to-1. But, there is more depth to it, right? Aqua is, she's the only Keyblade master, actually, of those 3. She's very fun to play, by the way. But, she's kind of just watching out and jumping from world to really solving problems, but also trying to keep an eye on Terra. Terra is battling that darkness within him, and Ven is also kind of confused, right? He's kind of taking a role larger than him, and throughout it, he kind of finds out his destiny, or what he was kind of brought in to do. Those are all the things I really like. When you think about him and Vanitas, right, being the pure light and pure dark, the Keyblade War, and Xehanort's plan, and what he's trying to do with Terra, and all that jazz. That is extremely good. It is one of the better stories, I think, lore, the Kingdom Hearts lore that they've told. It doesn't hurt that I love the 3 characters. I think they're each done really, really well. They're molded after, there's very much similarities. If you look at Ventus as a character, he should remind you of, actually, all 3 of them, right? Aqua, Kairi, Terra Riku, and then Ven, Sora. So, there's a basis there, but they managed to stand alone, and they managed to stand out so strongly that I very much would like them to have a Birth by Sleep 2. I've actually talked about that in the past on podcasts now. So, I think that's really good. I think they're deeper stories and what Xehanort's doing. There's a part of me that's like, how does Xehanort get away with it? Sometimes they really are dumb. Xehanort is kind of right there behind the scenes, and a lot of them are just, I can't believe Xehanort would do something like that. It's really only Ericus, especially as the lore expands, he does know, kinda, right? He knows something's off with Xehanort. He kind of had hoped that he pushed the darkness away. Instead, he kind of embraced it. And, again, though, in terms of the greater lore, there's a lot of deeper stuff, not just with, Ven and Vanitas. Ericus is a really big part of this game, too. Mark Hamill, I think, does a really good job there. But also Xehanort. You actually, and I struggle to remember, before 2010, did we ever really know all that much about Xehanort and kind of the larger plan? I'm sure we did to an extent, but they really do a lot of exposition talk, and that's in all Kingdom Hearts games, but you really do get a good grasp of what his plan is, not just with the three of them, not just with Terra and the body, right? He needs a younger body, a younger vessel for himself, all that jazz. And that, again, that's just one road he can go down. He doesn't have to go down if he doesn't want to. You also have just what he's kind of doing. And again, that kind of light versus dark. He's not purely evil. It's more about exploration. It's more about, the unknown, right? He leaves, he enters this larger world, and he just kind of wants to know stuff. And you get more of that as Xehanort expands and as the next 9 freaking years unfold until you get to Kingdom Hearts 3. You learn a lot about Xehanort, but you get a lot of it in Birth by Sleep, and actually you probably get the most of what you need to know, right? It's curiosity. It's about having that light and dark. They constantly talk about, Maleficent even talks about, for every light, there's a dark, there's darkness kind of there. You need both. You need that balance, and that's a big part of Xehanort's entire plan too, is that balance. So that's the stuff I really like. Okay, and I'm spending so much time talking about it. One, because I find it interesting and it's cool. But number two, I think it's extremely well done. I think those kind of stories in this game, that deeper lore, Xehanort, any of these characters, are very, very good. It's some of the most elite stuff that they have done. When it comes to the Disney stuff, I mean, it is what it is. When I think to the most important story moments, like, you're experiencing it and you got like the friendship kind of arc. And I will say one thing that I do like about it, because they're kind of all chasing each other, is that when they go to these worlds, there's always like that deeper reasoning why they're there. You're asking Peter Pan, your Stitch has the star, right? And it's like, okay, well, these other characters have been there. They're fine stories for what they are. In my opinion, there's nothing special about them. And I would also say the worlds that they picked, I mean, you got an okay amount of them. I mean, it's a spin-off game. It's not supposed to be, some gigantic thing. The game can take, between 5 to 7 hours, for each of these characters. So it can definitely, get up there. But I will say there's a little bit of, I mentioned earlier, when the kind of them following each other and splitting up the story when it doesn't work, I often find because they kind of give you groups, right? Like 3 worlds, you do it, then you go to Radiant Garden or something, then you have another 3 worlds and you go, XYZ. When they get into those 3 worlds, there oftentimes is this lack of that thread. Again, yeah, they'll talk about the character, or Ven will say, hey, I'm looking for Terra, something like that. But generally, like, they'll see each other. Aqua and Terra will literally see each other. Terra will leave, and then Aqua's like, man, I gotta find him. And it's like, well, he was just right there. You just talked to him. He left. When you meet together at Radiant Garden, you fight the massive Unversed. Ven gives you the Disney town, whatever, passports, and then you all leave, and then you talk about how, well, you need to kind of keep up with each character, and it's like, well, you were just all together, and then there's always a time where one of them just kind of walks off, and it's like you couldn't track them, they're just gone, they're now with Stitch all of a sudden, and you can't get to them. So, in those moments, look, you kind of need those moments, right? There's Disney worlds, there has to be that Disney influence. This is where I just don't think it's as powerful as other people might put into it, because they're just means to an end. They're just means to kind of get you going around and experiencing different boss fights. The boss fights are good. Fighting Maleficent as the dragon is always fun. You do that a couple times in the series, but there's some good bosses, and again, that's I would say a strength, because each character is going to be doing something a little bit different, right? Only Ven fights Captain Hook, right? In that world. The other characters, I think Aqua actually fights Vanitas there. So that's really cool, because while the stories, fold onto each other, it's not the same thing happening all 3 times, right? You're not fighting Maleficent all 3 times, right? You only do that actually with 1. So, that I can appreciate about it, but generally, in terms of like the larger Kingdom Hearts story, the Aqua Ven Terra thing, it's like, it actually makes it worse. It actually makes it a little bit more messy, because it's like, you're just trying to find each other. You're basically just trying to keep up, and yeah, then Terra will go away and kind of get lured in by Xehanort, and that's where I think the story really shines, not necessarily with the Disney world. So, think that's kind of all I want to say in terms of the story. I mean, the ending is so freaking good. The secret ending is it's necessary that you at least watch the secret ending, I think, of it. In terms of gameplay, let's talk a little bit about gameplay. So, this is one that, while the story has stayed largely the same in my head, like the quality is still there. Yeah, the Disney worlds are always up and down, but they always have been. The combat, the gameplay, is something that I remember being pitched on when it came to Birth by Sleep back, whenever it was, whether I played it in 2013, 14, 15, whatever time I did. I remember hearing that it's one of the better gameplay. And look, because this is my starting point in replaying these games, I can't say for sure, where my mind is versus the other games. but it is not as good as I remember it being. I think just my overall, just getting it off my chest, it's not as good as I remember. There's definitely some good elements to it. Being able to take on the abilities of all of the D-Links, right? Being connected to Mickey, being connected to Maleficent, actually, if you're Terra, right? And some of them are specific. I don't think anybody else actually has that link with Maleficent other than Terra. So you can play around with that, and they'll unlock different moves. Of course, like melding commands, I think is really cool, right? Having the different decks. And I remember, when I was younger, it was more difficult. Nowadays, not so difficult, but, you want a spread. You want your physical attacks, you want your magic, you kind of want to play around with it. There's some things that are necessary in order to do some of the boss fights, but I do find, obviously there's a lot of repetition, but that's kind of in any Kingdom Hearts game. The bosses definitely stand out. They're definitely good. The end bosses, I think the difficulty level jumps by about 500. I think I probably remembered that, but you don't really remember until you do it. Once you're fighting Bragg with Aqua, and then you fight Vanitas, or whatever the situation, actually I think it's Ven technically, whatever situation it might be, all three of them, that final fight is a joke, a literal joke. They're well done, but I think the game gets in its own way, okay? Because blocking and countering is tricky because the timing is you'll press square to block, and they'll block like a quarter second after you press it. It's a little bit clunky. It's a little bit slow. So that's not great, especially for a game that these enemies are attacking you a lot, and you might only be able to block like one or two, and they will no matter what, hit you with the third. That happens quite often. I think too, Kingdom Hearts 1, one of the main criticisms of all time is always going to be the camera, right? Well, that was a while ago before Birth by Sleep. Birth by Sleep's camera is also terrible. It's not as bad, but to say that it's good would be a disservice to you, the viewer here. It's terrible, especially with enemies that fly. Whenever an enemy kind of moves around overhead, you are screwed. And the issue is, again, some of those later boss fights, they do that. When Vanitas gets on his sword tsunami type thing, it's tough. It's tough to aim. It's tough to move around, and the camera gets in its own way. So, there's a lot of different elements to it. I like the moveset. I like melding the commands to kind of come up with something new. I like the differences, Aqua is a blast to play. Like Aqua, it's funny because playing as her last kind of gave me that jolt that I needed because, again, that overlap gets a little old when you're doing the Disney worlds, I think. And that's the majority of the game. So by the time you play the game twice, which I did with Terra and then Ven, and then I got to Aqua, it's like, all right, I don't know, if I'm definitely going to be able to get through it, but I don't know how much fun I'm going to have. Luckily, in my opinion, Aqua is the most fun by a lot. Her movement, her fluidity is 10 times better than the other two. Now, again, she's the only Keyblade Master, so maybe that's why she's able to do that, is because she has that rank and they don't. I can respect their different fighting styles. I think Terra's actually a blast to play as well. Ven, I like the backhanded, like Ahsoka style, kind of lightsaber, but with Keyblade thing. I like that. Not a lot of fun, I would say, to actually play. So that's another thing. Like, while I love the characters, some of them I prefer over the other in terms of that. Then you have, like, levels, some levels. The Coliseum in almost any Kingdom Hearts game is a joke to me. It's heavily, I don't know, it's just used the wrong way to me. There are some standouts. 1 and 2, I would say, are some standouts. But in this game, it's a lot of trial stuff, a lot of time trials. I hate anything that has to do with time in this game. Whether it's competing against Hercules and breaking pots or vases or whatever, or when you have to do, I think with both Aqua and with Terra, you have to take out like 9 rounds of enemies in certain times, and if you fail like the 8th round, you have to restart from round 1. I despise it. It has scarred me because I struggled with it when I was younger too. I still kind of struggle to it to this day. Those end bosses that I was mentioning, a lot of fun to a degree. You feel good about yourself when you beat them. I spent hours on those final bosses. So some of that stuff just gets in its own way. Overall, is the combat like serviceable? Yes. Is it some of the best that Kingdom Hearts has? Again, like, because I'm now starting, I will be able, I guess, to tell you at the end of all of this. I hope not. I hope not, because I think of the combat in generally just all Kingdom Hearts games to be, like, rather good. Okay, they're not, like, the most spectacular, but they're not bad. Chain of Memories doesn't count because it's the card thing. I've always actually hated that, but at least it's different. At least it's out there. Kingdom Hearts 3, I remember the combat probably being one of, if not the best, but it's also far too easy. I don't know if Kingdom Hearts has ever achieved, like, everything, like what you really want from the combat. Being fun and being responsive and kind of having that fluidity to it, and also being somewhat challenging while also being like you're not going to want to throw your controller against the wall. I don't know if any Kingdom Hearts game has ever achieved that perfect blend of the perfect light with perfect darkness. I don't know if they've ever done that, but I will say, and I said it earlier, and I said I made a video on podcast now. One thing I can absolutely say for this game is it brought me back. There's biasness there because this is one of my favorite franchises of all time, but going back and replaying this game, it puts you into Kingdom Hearts. Like, it does have everything you want from a Kingdom Hearts game, and weirdly enough, now like Sora is in it, so it's not 100%, but the idea that Sora is Kingdom Hearts, Nomura believes that, and I respect that, and I think to a large extent that is true. But at the same time, I think this game actually proves you don't need always Sora, Riku, Kairi. You might, in terms of like the larger thread that's being like pulled through, the entire franchise. But generally, I think this game does a really good job with brand new characters. I mean, you got Mickey, you got Merlin, you got Yen Sid, you got some people that you've seen before and you will see after. Donald and Goofy are in the game, but briefly, right? These are characters that are kind of there to help the overall thing. Kairi's there to introduce the grandmother that kind of goes over like the history of the world. So there's some really cool moments there, but generally, I think these three do a really good job of holding it up themselves, and it brings you back. Again, it looks like a Kingdom Hearts game. It feels like it generally. Some things will always be better in some versus worse in others. The music is there. You're jumping around the Disney worlds. It's got the killer, like, deeper lore story. It's got everything you really want, and also the stuff that you also don't need or don't want. That's also in this game too. But I'm glad I did it. It's been 6.5, a little bit less than 6.5 years since I've played it. And since I played any Kingdom Hearts game besides 3, Remind, and Melody of Memory. This is the first one in 6 years or so. So glad I did it. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Make sure, as always, you're subscribed to the channel, bell icon's turned on, and I hope to see you all on the next one.